Shall we have the response from Ms. Lim first, since you're coming from South Korea, the latest moves by DPRK?
So can you just repeat a little bit? I mean,
the latest moves by DPRK, missile launching from the south. What do you think is likely to be the next step?
Oh, okay, sure. Sorry, I mean the sound was not that clear. Yes, you know, they consecutively doing this, which is definitely a threat, not only just for South Korea, for the whole region, not only just for the Northeast Asia, for the whole globe, because you know, they already conducted the 4 times again the nuclear tests. Now the remaining thing is again the developing the certain level of technology to deliver that nuclear warhead to wherever they want to. So you know, they cannot probably stop this kind of missile test, but the latest one is pretty, in some senses, very scary because they simultaneously launched three different missiles, and it was again, as you guys already briefed, it was in the Japanese air defense zone. So, which means, I mean, their technology has been certainly improving. So the rest of the world, of course, especially the South Korea, Japan, or United States, we collectively have to deal with this development.
I see. And during the G20 summit in Hangzhou, Mr. Zhang, the Chinese president, when meeting with the South Korean president, was reiterating China's stance that it is against the THAAD system. So how should we understand the difficult situation, it seems, that Northeast Asia is facing? On the one hand, DPRK keep on building its power in terms of its nuclear capabilities. On the other hand, the powers in the region needs to be on the same platform in terms of understanding the future of security of the region.
Well, I think there are 2 points. First is that I think the outside world or some countries have been exaggerating the threat from North Korea. Actually, I don't think they have acquired the capabilities of producing a real nuclear bomb and the capability of launching long-range and ballistic missiles. Actually, from the test before, maybe they can only launch short-range missiles inside or within 800 kilometers. On the other hand, I think the South Korea and the United States decision to deploy the THAAD system is not necessary. It is not effective to fight or to defend against North Korea's attack, because we know that North Korea's attack will mainly be short-range missiles and also the rockets, especially the 300 millimeter caliber rockets. This is destructive. I think South Korea and the United States should take more measures to defend against such kind of weapons.
So, Ms. Hwang, of course, we understand you're coming from the American perspective, but is there a way of dealing with the current situation besides the THAAD system, which Mr. Zhang has already illustrated is not necessarily going to protect South Korea against the most possible kinds of attacks anyway?
Well, you're actually asking several different things, and unfortunately, we are conflating a number of different threats here. It is absolutely, we cannot, the nuclear issue is one issue. Missiles are a separate issue, and Captain Zhang is exactly right that actually the short range and possibly medium range missiles are the biggest threat to South Korea. Nevertheless, North Korea's development of long range missiles is a threat to broader region and the entire world. The point is that THAAD is one method of defending against certain types of missiles which are long range. That is true, which is exactly why South Korea needs to consider adopting a far more integrated and even broader types of missile defense systems.
Ms. Lim, here is an interesting dilemma. probably the interesting is not even a correct word, shall I say, a very difficult dilemma for South Korea. If it deploys that system, apparently it is protecting itself from certain possibilities of attacks from the north. However, it also endangers its long-time built relations with China, which is certainly a big player in terms of maintaining peace and stability of the Korean Peninsula as a whole. So, when Seoul faces this dilemma, at this moment we all know this is already a political choice, but what's the next step? I mean, can Seoul just throw away one to get another, or the other way around?
Sure. Last month, I do remember I did this interview or panel discussion from Seoul. At the time,
right.
I mean, I did my, yes, I already mentioned about my own expectations about the G20 summit. Even though it is the main purpose of the G20 summit should not be a just parochial thing, but still I just mentioned that at the time the G20 summit can provide a good platform to the regional members, and not only just to the regional members, to the other members as well, to think about this very important issue together. As Ms. Hwang mentioned, you know, that is, of course, it's not a almighty thing. It is only one method. I mean, to protect not only South Korea, also protect other countries as well. So we have to understand that this situation is really, really serious. And the more important thing is, as we saw at the G20 summit, continue conversation and the dialogues in spite of any difficulty. So in that sense, I do have some optimism, especially in the relationship between the China and South Korea, as we saw a few days ago in the Hangzhou.
Captain Zhang, of course, China's attitude is very clear. As we said earlier, during the G20 summit, it was once again being reiterated during the presidential discussion between the two countries, South Korea and China. But on the other hand, China also needs to face the fact that the DPRK has been developing its capabilities. Despite of the fact that you earlier mentioned it is, quote unquote, not as serious as some would suggest, but still it is a threat. So what tools does China have in the hand in order to bring DPRK further closer to the overall consensus of the region, which also is what China holds, peace and stability of the Korean Peninsula?
I think sanctions imposed by other countries, especially the United States and South Korea, will not work, because we have seen that for many years such kind of sanctions will never have stopped North Korea from the missile launches and also nuclear tests.
Probably so only quicken their process.
Yes, so I think the six-party talks currently is the most effective way. So my suggestion is that the United States and South Korea return to the negotiation table.
You mean South Korea or DPRK?
With DPRK, resume the six-party talks. We know that the United States and South Korea don't want to resume such kind of talks, but North Korea has been calling for the United States to sit down for negotiations. I think this is the best way to resolve this issue. Otherwise, there is currently no better way.
Okay. Ms. Hwang, before I ask you, I want to put in a little bit more information there. The UN Security Council, of course, has condemned the DPRK's latest moves. DPRK rejected that. And also, having said that, China has been, as you may know, continuously asking and urging all sides to exercise restraint. This, of course, including DPRK itself. Having said that, though, can Washington, together with Seoul as well, somewhat suggesting about going to negotiations? What kind of gestures does Washington believe could be genuine, from, let's just say, Beijing, from Pyongyang, for Washington to go back to the negotiation table, at least for the dim light of it?
Well, here's the thing. I partially agree with Captain Zhang. I think he is correct that increased sanctions from the United States, frankly, and South Korea will not change North Korea's behavior. Having said that, I think we cannot say that sanctions will never stop North Korea, primarily because all countries in the world, and especially China, have not actually implemented complete sanctions. Nevertheless, the point is that the six-party talks was actually focused only on the nuclear issue. The six-party talks never included any discussion of missiles. That's the first issue. Second issue is China keeps urging restraint on all parties. Well, frankly, I think that message is mistargeted. It should be restraint on North Korea. The United States, South Korea, frankly, even Japan, and I would say even Russia and China, we have all five countries have been exhibiting great restraint in the last 10, 12 years of the six-party talks. So South Korea and the United States, by implementing a missile defense system, that is restraint. It is not an offensive system. In terms of returning to the six-party talks, it is North Korea that has rejected the six-party talks, hand out, fully. It has said over and over again, it will not return to six-party talks. It is not the United States and South Korea.
Ms. Hwang, may I follow up with a few questions related to your answer? And of course, I want to also invite suggestions coming from the other two panelists on these. First of all, does the possibility of the collapse of a regime as a result of sanction necessarily going to bring peace and stability into the region? I think that is an interesting question to be asked when we say, let's do as much sanction as possible.
I completely agree with you, and that is exactly the reason why the United States and South Korea, and frankly the rest of the world, has exhibited restraint for the last almost 70 years since the armistice in 1953. The United States had the ability during the Korean War, actually, to completely annihilate the North Korean regime. It chose not to do that. It has chosen not to ever invade again North Korea.
I'm talking about sanctions. I'm talking about sanctions. Let's not talk about the Korean War. The Korean War is more complicated than that. We know it is not about sanctions at the time. Ms. Hwang, let's focus on the sanctions.
Asking about
I'm talking about sanctions. Let's talk about the sanctions.
You are asking about the result of a regime collapse. And my answer is that, in fact, for the last 70 years, the policy has been actually to not allow a regime collapse.
All right.
Now, you are exactly right. This is the dilemma of complete sanctions.
All right.
It could lead to the collapse of
Another
the North Korean
question
regime.
to you, Ms. Hwang.
My point is that countries do not agree on whether that is ultimately the best end goal or not.
All right. Another thing for you to briefly explain is restraint. When you're talking about the word restraint, does it necessarily mean restraint or indifference over the past few years, for example, of the US politics toward DPRK? Mainly something we're talking about, sometimes we're talking about strategic patience, which many strategists, even inside the US, were suggesting it is mainly just to do nothing. So does restraint equals to indifference? Well, first of all,
strategic patience is not the actual official policy of the Obama administration. But actually, I am not the person that brought up the word restraint. You mentioned that as being the official Chinese statement that the Chinese government has publicly urged restraint on all countries in the region.
You said earlier, Ms. Hwang, that all sides have been exercising restraint. That's exactly a quote from you just a few minutes ago. So does restraint mean?
The Chinese official statement, the Chinese official policy and statements have been to urge restraint on all the parties.
All right.
And I am merely saying that according to that definition, the United States, South Korea, and Japan, and again, Russia and China also have been practicing restraint.
Strategic
North
patience,
Korea
what does that mean?
Is the only one that has
Strategic
not.
patience, what does that mean?
I have actually no idea what
Okay.
I actually have no idea what strategic patience means, and neither does the Obama administration, which has stated that that is not the official policy of the administration.
Let's go
It is something that analysts have used to describe the policy.
There must be a reason why analysts describe that in that way. But let me go to you, Captain Zhang, here in Beijing. We have asked Professor Hwang to illustrate clearly what her points are. So what about the current situation? Now, restraints, sanctions, indifference, patience, and sad, these different kinds of disagreements, these are all mixed together. What can be the next step?
Well, first I want to say that both sides, North Korea and the United States and South Korea, should exercise restraint. First, the United States and South Korea should reduce the size and the times of the large-scale military exercises conducting year by year on the Korean Peninsula. We can see thousands of military forces have been deployed on the Korean Peninsula and have been put into such kind of military exercises, aiming at overthrowing the North Korean regime and for actions after the regime collapse. And second, I think the United States and South Korea should stop the idea of conducting regime change in the North Korea government. So this has made the North Koreans be worried about being overthrown. So they are now trying to produce nuclear weapons for deterrence of possible aggression by the United States and South Korea.
Captain Zhang, you are trying to suggest that the DPRK was more reactive than proactive. Is that what you're saying?
I think so.
All right. Let's go to Ms. Lim. Do you agree with what Captain Zhang just suggested? Or do you agree with what Professor Hwang earlier illustrated? When it comes to Seoul's difficult choices, because it is really Seoul that is over there across the border from the DPRK, of course, China also on the other side of the border. But what can be this choice?
Yeah, first and foremost, regarding the the opinions from the Captain Zhang, I only partially agree because during the probably Kim Jong-il's period, some experts thought that they are trying to do this to get a better bargaining chips for the negotiations. But some other people will say that, that was obviously, that was not. So there were lots of theories or perceptions, interpretations about their intentions during the Kim Jong-il's period. But since the Kim Jong-un came to the office, I think it's totally different now. Now it's their intention is crystal clear. I would say, it's almost now their raison d'etre. So that is why I cannot completely agree with Captain Zhang's that observation. And you're totally right. We are now, facing a serious dilemma. Once probably we, how would you say, admit there's this kind of capability officially, it's going to be the end of the NPT system. So it's going to be a totally different war. So we cannot do that either. But at the same time, we might need to resume the dialogue with the North Korea at some point. But to decide that timing, the more important thing is, I think, conversations among us, at least, the 5 members of the 60-party talk, or the rest of the world. So the consolidated opinions of the rest of the world or international community should be much more appreciated than just resuming the dialogue with the Pyongyang.